Kuzangpula and welcome to Heart, the stories of us. This is Cheku, your host. Today I have a very, very special guest, and I'm very excited to bring to you a discussion that will cover varieties of topics. And then I am sure that you're very excited to meet our guest today. Our special guest today in our show Heart, the stories of us, is none other than His Excellency, the Ambassador of Bhutan to Australia, His Excellency Sonam Tobgay. We thank you a lot, Your Excellency, for coming to the show. We know that you have a very busy and tight schedule, but we are very honored that you took out this time to speak to us. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much, Chiku. I'm most delighted to be here and join you in this conversation this evening.
First thing first. So, since you are the ambassador, the first resident ambassador of Bhutan to Australia, I just wanted to quickly ask this one. The diplomatic relations between Bhutan and Australia was established in 2002. But the embassy was set up only in 2021, which is a very recent memory. So I just wanted to ask you, does it normally take this long for embassy to establish?
No, thank you very much, Chiku. This is I think it's a very pertinent question because this is the basis of our bilateral relations. But I thought maybe I can just also give you a very historical summary of the bilateral relations between Australia and Bhutan. I thought for the benefit of the audience, I should just share with you a little bit background. So, Australia and Bhutan actually began our relations in the 1960s. To be more precise, it began in 1962. And how it began was Bhutan was, at that time just emerging from self-imposed isolation, and we were looking to modernize the country. And in 1962, Australia, which was one of the leaders of the Colombo Plan, had extended an invitation to Bhutan to attend. And that conference was taking place in Melbourne. So the delegation at that time was led by Her Royal Highness Ajitashi Doji, the queen, the sister of the third Queen of Bhutan, Her Majesty H.Esonamtobgay. So Ajitashi was the leader of the delegation, and she was accompanied by two other ladies. Yes. So it was an all-female delegation that actually came to attend this conference in Melbourne in 1962. And in many ways, they were actually, it was kind of a record because firstly, it was an all-female delegation in the 1960s when, other countries did not have, they had very few ladies in their delegation, but ours was an entire delegation comprised of ladies.
Yes.
And they, if I'm not mistaken, they would have been the first Bhutanese to land on the shores of Australia. Right. So they came to attend a Colombo Plan meeting that was also the first international conference that Bhutan was attending. And so normally we were invited as an observer. So you are required to stay as an observer for 2 years, but the Australian government, being persuaded by our delegation, they waived off the mandatory 2-year period and then admitted us as a member. So following that meeting, then we were able to receive a lot of assistance through the Colombo Plan, as a result of which the Bhutanese started coming to study in Australia.
Yes. So
that is the history of our relations. Okay? And so Australia in many ways was kind of introduced us to the world.
Yes.
They introduced us to the international community through the Colombo Plan. So Australia has been a friend of Bhutan since 1960. Actually, that was the beginning of a very special relationship with Australia. Then about a decade later, then Australia was also the first, one of the first Western countries to welcome us into the United Nations when we became a member in 1971. By then, the Bhutanese, there were increasing numbers of Bhutanese coming to study in Australia. But it was much later, in 2002, that we established diplomatic relations. But it took a long time because Bhutan was also we were engaging with the international community in a very measured manner.
Yes.
So it was only in 2002 that we established diplomatic relations. And the reason, and then we would have liked to have, opened an embassy then, but you see, Bhutan being a least developed country at that time, we were constrained by resources. So it was much later in 2021. Actually, I was here in 2019 on a scoping mission because I was directed by the government to see how should we, basically do an exploratory work on opening an embassy. So I came here in 2019, and the government by then had decided that we needed to open an embassy because of the expanding relations with Australia, and also because of the increasing number of Bhutanese who were coming here to study and to work. So we were actually set to open the embassy by July 2020. But as we all know, then COVID occurred, and then the Australian government, they closed their borders. So the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade told us to hold on for a while. We postpone our decision for a while because they'd sealed their borders. So it was much later I think it was in the early. It was in July 2021 that they said, okay, now we can come and open an embassy. So my team and I, we arrived, my team members actually arrived 2 months before me, but I arrived in Australia in September 2021 at the height of the COVID. We arrived here, I had to quarantine in Sydney for 2 weeks because there was no embassy we did not have any place, residence to stay. So after my quarantine, then I traveled to Canberra for the first. Canberra was in lockdown at that time.
Nice.
So I had to stay in an Airbnb for about a month. Accommodation was very difficult to find. Then I moved to a service apartment where I stayed there for about 8 months, and then slowly began the process of opening the embassy. We had to find an office space. And so then we used the occasion of the National Day in 2021 to formally open the embassy.
Yes.
So we formally opened the embassy on 17th December 2021.
Yes.
So it's a long journey, but I think we've made a very good journey.
Yes, I can see that, Your Excellency. So besides the increasing areas of cooperation between the two countries and then expanding number of Bhutanese coming to study in Australia, what other factors would have contributed to the establishment of this embassy, if there's any?
I think the relations were expanding, as I mentioned earlier, and of course the cornerstone of Australia-Bhutan relations has always been education, because, as I mentioned earlier, it is due to the assistance or the scholarships provided by Australia that actually began the process of the development of our bilateral relations. And so education has always been the pillar of our bilateral relations. But then we've also expanded into other areas. They've supported us in agriculture. They even supported us during the coronation of the Fort Trugelpo. But there's also been, this incremental expansion of trade. But one of the other main factors is because of the increasing number of Bhutanese in Australia.
Yes.
That really made us take a decision to establish an embassy here.
Yes.
And let's just like to mention that we were actually, after we established diplomatic relations, our embassy in Bangkok, so our ambassador in Bangkok was actually accredited to Australia. So he or she would come to Australia to present their credentials, and in a year they would visit about once or twice a year. But that was a very inefficient and ineffective way of having, conducting your relations with Australia. It was very inefficient. So for us to now, because of the growing numbers of Bhutanese here and the expanding relations, we felt that our presence in Australia was necessary.
I think after so many years, and then now with the establishment of embassy, I can feel that, this has just started. The game has just started. So where do you see this relationship going?
Now that we've been here for now the embassy has been open for 3 years, and I must say, I forgot to mention to you that I was appointed as the first resident ambassador. So it's one of the greatest honors of my life to be appointed as the first resident ambassador. But so we've been here. Now the embassy has been operational for 3 years.
Yes.
And within these 3 years itself, we've been able to do so much more than when we were not having a presence in Canberra.
Yes.
Firstly, we are able to, I've been traveling to all the cities where there are large numbers of Bhutanese.
Yes.
For instance, in my first year of the opening, I traveled to Perth 4 times,
Yes.
mainly to engage with the Bhutanese community, and then also to engage with the educational institutions where there are large numbers of Bhutanese students, like ECU and Murdoch in Perth. Then likewise in all the other cities I also engaged.
Yes.
First, my priority was to meet with the Bhutanese community and to let them know that the embassy has been established, and also to share with them the functions of the embassy and how the embassy can assist them. So that has been one of the biggest advantages. And as I mentioned earlier, one of my primary responsibilities here is to take care of the welfare of the Bhutanese citizens. That's my primary responsibility. Then the other is to expand and strengthen and expand our relations with the Australia at all levels, at the government level, at the business level, at people to people level.
Yes. So I'd like to quickly mention this one. While you were visiting the people, different pockets of the cities and in the country, I'm sure that because our people, we are far from home, far from our parents, far from our loved ones, we are separated. So I'm sure that, people are going through tough times, difficult times. So have you been able to talk to them about what are the difficulties they are facing? What do they say about this?
Of course, when I met with them, of course, I would. It was not a one-way street where I just gave instructions and I told them the embassy will do this. I wanted to hear their concerns, their concerns, their challenges, what opportunities they see, and also for them to share their views with me and the embassy on what the embassy can do for them. So we've been able to have this exchange, and then I was able to better understand their needs and their concerns. So this has been a very good process in terms of engaging with the Bhutanese community. And I must say that we are based in Canberra, but Australia is, it's a large country, it's an island continent. And, getting from place to place is not easy, but nevertheless we try our best. For instance, within the first year of the embassy itself, there were many very sad incidents that took place in Perth. For instance, someone was sick, someone has had an accident, unfortunately we've lost some of precious lives in Perth and in a few other cities. So as much as possible we reached out to the family members, to the friends and to their families back home. We assist them in repatriating their remains back home. So we've been trying to assist in this manner. And then even in the case of sickness, when people get sick, we try to see wherever I am. I mean, in Canberra it's easier because since we are physically present there, and whenever somebody is sick or somebody's had an accident, we try and be there in person to comfort the family and their friends.
Yes. I don't know, Your Excellency, if this could be the right question. So how often do you get this maybe call for help, assistance from a Bhutanese in Canberra or from Perth? Do you ever get any calls or maybe like any people asking for help, any sort of assistance for that matter?
So we get calls every day.
Yes.
We get calls every day. We get calls beyond office hours, in the late at night. And so I've told my colleagues from day one that our policy must be that every call that is received by the embassy, if we are not in the embassy, we have a recording machine, that we must respond to the calls that are made to the embassy. and if there's help that is required, we must also respond and then see how best we can assist. So we make it a point to address every call, and we of course we assist our Bhutanese citizens as best as we can within our means. Sometimes it's difficult. There are certain cases where it's very difficult, but nevertheless we still try and look for solutions and try and at least address some of their problems.
I can't agree more, Your Excellency, because I have particularly been a recipient of one of this kind. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the many services that embassy provides is the passport renewal. So my passport was expiring, and then I panicked, like Your Excellency. So I didn't know what to do, and then I saw this post on the Bhutanese embassy, and then I straight away it was just an email away. So I just emailed, and then I received this response within no time. So I was able to get the services done in, like, I think in a week's time. It was so fast. And then I was like, whenever I see my friends who have the similar problems, I always share this. The embassy is right there. They respond to your calls right now. I mean, and then they're very fast in responding to your emails and calls and inquiries, and especially this one, because I also got to know from friends from different nationalities that when they have to renew their documents, passports, they have to travel back to their country, which is like very taxing to them. Money doesn't come very easy here, Your Excellency, that you know very well. So I thought like this is one of the many services that embassy has brought to our doorstep, and which we are very grateful about, Your Excellency.
No, thank you very much for mentioning this, because I thought I should just share with the community about this. When I came on the scoping mission, and I also did actually at that time I just traveled to Sydney and to Canberra, but we found out from the people that one of the biggest requests they had was for passports, and prior to the establishment of the embassy here, getting your passport renewed was a very cumbersome process, because the applications had to go to our embassy in Bangkok, then they would then send it to Thimphu, and the whole process took about 2 months. So one of the before we decided to open the embassy, one of our submissions to the government was that when we open the embassy, we must start issuing passports in Canberra. And so the government consented to our request, and we then ordered these machines and set up a mechanism on how to issue passports. So now we once the application is submitted online, we have a mechanism by and it is approved. It has to be submitted online to Thimphu, and there's a whole process. This process that takes place in Thimphu, which is beyond our control. So once that is done and they've given the approval, our policy is to issue the passports within 10 working days. That's the maximum. But we try. Most of the passports are issued within 5 working days.
That's true. Let's just going back to this bilateral relationship. Now, like you mentioned earlier about the benefits, the impacts that this bilateral relations had to a country, to individual level, the state level. Now, especially after the opening of this embassy, how has it impacted Bhutan's community or economy more?
Firstly, having a presence in Canberra is, at least in Australia, is very important, because the capital of Australia is in Canberra. The embassy can only be located in Canberra. Although there's a feeling among some Bhutanese that because the majority of the Bhutanese are in Perth, the embassy should be in Perth. But it doesn't work that way, because it has to be established in the capital. But having a physical presence there means that the ambassador and the officers of the embassy, they have direct access to Australian government officials, then to educational institutions. So we are able to engage with Australian authorities and relevant Australian partners on on a face-to-face basis, and we are able to take up issues with them directly
Yes.
instead of communicating through emails or doing it through other means of correspondence. So that is one benefit. We are able to address issues immediately. Then of course, once you are present here, you also become aware of the different opportunities that become available. So the embassy, we've been very open to looking at all the opportunities for Bhutan.
Yes.
We've really kept our antennas open and are open to any suggestions on how to expand. Basically, because we are a new embassy, we have a clean slate to start from. And so we are very open to suggestions, and we've explored all the avenues for us to expand our relations with Australia.
Now, touching on the services by the embassy, of many rumors that I have heard, and of many discussions that I have listened to, one of the pertinent one that keeps coming up among our Bhutanese friends, people, families, that because accommodation these days is like, it's so difficult everywhere in Australia. So especially in Perth, it's so much of a problem. So one of the concerns, one of the discussions that's going around is like, what if embassy could, come up with a sort of an accommodation arrangement, emergency accommodation arrangement, so that could really save a lot of time, resources of our Bhutanese fellows. So what can you say on this, essentially?
Yeah, that's something that we gave thought to.
Yes.
But when you have a diplomatic establishment, for instance in Canberra, and then for in the case of Perth, it would be a consulate.
Yes.
So when you talk about accommodation, because we are a diplomatic entity,
Yes,
it is very difficult for us to acquire property, and then because you are governed by different regulations, and so to get a property and then you have to acquire on a commercial basis. You see, you're a commercial basis. So which means whereas so there's a different regulation that apply for that. Whereas as a diplomatic entity, when we purchase, we are entitled to tax free.
right.
So in that case, you can only use those properties for diplomatic purposes and not for any other purpose. So there's some difficulties. So if the government were to buy or get some accommodation, and then we'll have to do it on a commercial basis, paying the taxes, the duties, and of course we're also constrained by resources. So it is, that is a challenge. But ideally, we would have liked to have done it. But with regard to the housing crisis that you just mentioned, I know it was a big concern for us in 2023 when there was a surge of Bhutanese students who were coming to Perth, and we had heard so many stories of Bhutanese having difficulties finding accommodation. So this was a big concern for the embassy. So what I immediately did was I reached out to all the universities. I called the pro-vice chancellors that were responsible for international students and said that now this is a challenge that our Bhutanese students are facing, and it is your responsibility to help them look for accommodation. So I called the ECU, the Murdoch, and a few other colleges and RTUs, as well as Study Perth, and then I also reached out to my whole network of friends. And then after having spoken with them, then we decided to issue a notification giving guidance to Bhutanese students who are not yet arrived in Perth, but also to those who are already here, on explaining to them the different avenues through which you could find accommodation, because many of them are actually not aware of these things.
True.
So we were able to disseminate that information. And of course, the Bhutanese community itself in Perth were able to assist our fellow citizens.
I can agree to that very much. Like His Majesty always mentions, I think Bhutanese, we look after each other so well here, and then which everyone of us are very proud of. And Another concern that shared recently, now it has been over. I'm sure that the discussion is not there anymore. So regarding the age limitation for 485 visa, so because immigration imposes restrictions to people above the age of 35 and then made them ineligible to apply for 485 visa. So we had this, groups, WeChat groups, Telegram groups, trying to disseminate the information to one another and then trying to reach out to the relevant organizations, relevant authorities. And then most of the people had this concern and then feeling that embassy could have played a role here. So what is your comment on this, Latush?
Firstly, I must say that, of course, when Australia came up with this new this migration policy in 2023, we studied that policy in detail, and it was immediately clear that it would impact a lot of Bhutanese. And from the statements of the Australian government authorities, we could also see that it was their national. This was being taken for their national interest, and of course, then it generated a lot of discussions among the international students, including our Bhutanese. And it is not that the embassy did not do anything. And since we are having a chat, maybe I'll share it with you. We informally inquired with some of our friends in the government, and then also expressed to them that these are the concerns of our community, especially for those who have now, they've invested a lot and they've come here to Australia to study. And then now there's a sudden change of policy where they are deprived of this post-study visa, especially if you are above the age of 35. And so the informal response that they shared with me was also that they very politely told me that this policy is not aimed at any particular country. It is a policy being taken for the interest of Australia. And of course they had an exception for the UK and Hong Kong, is off their bilateral agreement. But this was made very clear, and so I, as the ambassador, have to understand and read in between the lines and say what the message they are conveying to me. And of course it is akin to, for instance, in Bhutan, if our parliament is passing a law and there are some foreigners who do not like that law and trying to influence, you might get the same response from our parliamentarians. So, so we have to understand that aspect of the, of their national policy. But I think there's a misperception that the embassy did not do anything. These things are very delicate, delicate matters with regard to bilateral relations. So it has to be handled very well. And so I fully sympathize with, I was telling my colleagues in the embassy, we have to put ourselves in the Bhutanese shoes, who've come here, who've invested so much. And then you feel that there'll be opportunities for you, and suddenly there's this decision, and it changes everything. So I thoroughly sympathize with those who are affected. But nevertheless, we also try to explore with the universities on what could be done if there were opportunities for them to, stay on for studies or do a PhD or masters by research. Because these were some of the criteria that we could have explored, and we did discuss. But I do feel for the people who have been affected.
The message is loud and clear, Your Excellency. I'm sure that our audience feel that too, and then they understand about this as well. Besides Bhutan being known as the carbon negative country, one of the most happiest countries in the world, it is now known as the first country to build the mindfulness city, which is first of its kind in the world. And wherever I go, wherever we go, so we get to hear, we get to talk, we get to listen to these Gelifu mindfulness city. And now that, since Your Excellency, you mentioned that the relations between Australia and Bhutan is, going to a greater height, greater extent, what do you feel about the benefits? What sort of benefits we could reap from Australia, given its resources, expertise, especially particularly in this Gelefu Mindfulness Citila?
So, and I'll go back to with what I started. Australia has been a partner of Bhutan since 1962. And so when His Majesty announced the Gelefu Mindfulness City during the last National Day, we have shared this vision with our Australian partners, including in the government and all people in the private sector as well. And we've basically conveyed to them that this is going to be the biggest undertaking of Bhutan. There's a vision of His Majesty the King, but the entire population of Bhutan, including the Bhutanese abroad, are invested in this project, a very visionary project that is only going to increase the prosperity of Bhutan. But nevertheless, we need international partners. And I've been telling my Australian, our friends in the Australian government and in the business that Australia has always been a partner of Bhutan. And we will also we will request them to also be a partner in the GMC.
Yes.
So we expect that there will be interest as things develop. The people will develop an interest. In fact, when His Majesty the King was visiting Australia in October, and when His Majesty interacted with the leadership of Australia, he also shared with them his vision for the Gelefu Mindfulness City, as well as with several other ministers and Australian business leaders. And this generated a lot of interest amongst the Australian leadership as well as the business leaders. And I think they do admire this very, very long-term, very futuristic, visionary thinking of His Majesty, and they are very, I think they do sound very receptive to being engaged in the GMC. So I'm very optimistic that we will be able to get a good partnership from Australia.
Yes. Glad to know, and then I'm sure that people watching this show are even glad as well. So what about the Bhutanese people who resides abroad? I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the majority of the Bhutanese living abroad, it's maximum in Australia. So, in what capacities, in what roles do you think these people can contribute to the development of the city?
I think again I'll refer. Let me recall. His Majesty's audiences to the Bhutanese community in Australia, in Sydney, in Canberra, and in Perth, the two audiences, when he shared with the Bhutanese here about the Gelefu Mindfulness City, and the message was very clear that that he would like the Bhutanese in Australia, abroad, to have an equal stake in the GMC as our fellow Bhutanese back home, and by that he means he wants you to invest, not to donate money. He wants you to invest, where there's returns for you as well. Plus, he says, if you remember, he said, I want you to come back with all the skills and let us build Bhutan together. He means let us build the GMC together. So, each and every Bhutanese abroad, including in Australia, has a role to play. And I hope that, this will be an inspiration. His Majesty's message will be an inspiration for the Bhutanese to go back and contribute. Because this one will be, it will not just benefit. Of course, we are now getting more advanced in age, but our children and our grandchildren. And this is, it will ensure success of Bhutan for perpetuity.
One of the concern is that increasing number of people, not just the Bhutanese, increasing number of people, whoever comes to Australia to study, the first thing they do after arriving here, is to explore the permanent residency pathway. So, which means their long-term goal is to stay here in Australia, and then they're least worried about going back That's my perception. I may be wrong, but given these increasing trend where Bhutanese people also, are exploring these avenues to apply for permanent residency, to become a permanent residency, so how well do you think this could help build our city back home?
Let me flip that one. I think I agree with you. There are many people who are acquiring permanent residency, and there's reasons for that. Because when Australia is, such a very generous country. Because when you acquire it actually, compared to other countries, relatively far easier to acquire permanent residency in Australia. And the reason for that, and the reason why people are also applying for it, is because it increases opportunities for employment. It also increases other opportunities for your children if you have them living with you in Australia. But then when I talk to the Bhutanese who have PR, they say that it does not mean that they're going to stay here forever. It's just that when they're here, it increases their prospects. But on the other hand, what they say is that when you engage in discussions with them and have some deep conversations with them, they always have this deep love, and affection for Bhutan, and so they want to. The first thing they ask me is, how can we contribute? How can we contribute back to Bhutan? So I tell them, now the world is so interconnected, and you need not be physically present in Bhutan to contribute to Bhutan. You can contribute through investments, you can contribute through ideas, and because if you're a permanent residency or if you have a long-term visa, you can always travel back and forth if you have that flexibility. In fact, I encourage many of the enterprising Bhutanese who are here in Australia to establish businesses not only here but also in Bhutan. You have a branch there, you do partnerships with Australian businesses, and you can do back and forth cross-pollination of businesses. So these are all possibilities, you see. So we have to be very flexible in our mind. It's not that old mindset where you are out of the country and you cannot come back. You see, now it's very flexible. Air travel is easier. If you were to travel on a good connection, you will reach Bhutan in what, 12 hours, 10, 12 hours. So Bhutan is not far. It's not as far as America or Europe. So these are the possibilities that are there. And actually, I would encourage the Bhutanese to have that mindset of not saying, oh, now I'm in Australia, so I cannot do anything. You can contribute in many ways. In fact, actually, I must say, thanks to the Bhutanese in Australia, you're not only helping yourselves. You're not only you've not only given your family a good life, but many of you also sending remittances back home, which is helping your family. You're also helping other relatives. You're helping, with some. If you're sending money back to your villages, helping in the renovation of lagangs, contributing, to the community. So these are the benefits. So we have to look at it in that light. So the presence of the Bhutanese in Australia is a great blessing for Bhutan. We must not see that as a brain drain or a lost asset, because I think it is also the thinking of the government, but from the embassy side, we are very clear that the Bhutanese, wherever you are in the world, and I've been telling this to the Bhutanese here, that you are an asset for Bhutan. You are an asset. You are a precious, you are a precious asset for Bhutan. And, the government and Bhutan will always be there for you.
One of the concerns that people share about establishing business back in Bhutan, contributing in their own small way to the nation building, is that we have a very stricter, rigid regulations about businesses, setups, clearances. So around these areas, they're a little bit, not very positive about these avenues. So what can you say on this, Excellency?
I agree with you. I fully agree with you. You and I know you have been in the BBS, which is a government owned, and I've been in government for over 30 years, and I know how rigid some of our policies are with regard to businesses. And there's a recognition in the government that this has to change, because if you do not, we will not progress. So that is why, if you listened to His Majesty's address, you will see His Majesty mentioned that the GMC will have no legacy. There's no bad legacy. You start from scratch. That's the whole idea. You start, regulations you create. When you invite investors, you say, okay, now what is the type of regulation you want? So that is the model that the rest of the country also needs to follow, because you are aware that the Gelufu the GMC will only be 5% of the country. Yes. But the whole idea is that, as the model that the GMC will be developed on must one day, after the 40-year the vision, must also be implemented in the rest of Bhutan.
Yes.
So it is from now itself, the government is fully in recognition of all these challenges. They are already trying to do away with many of the impediments on establishing businesses. And I think the current government is doing a lot.
I'm sure this will give a lot of encouragement to people who are...
I must say, Chukwu, the other thing is, I must say is that whenever these concerns have been expressed, in fact, I have heard in Perth, in Canberra, then in a few other cities, whenever I met with the Bhutanese community, they've shared with me all these concerns. So we've listed them out, and we've shared them with the banks, we've shared them with the Ministry of Economic Affairs at that time, and all the avenues where there have been obstacles, we've shared this.
Yes.
And so that these are the concerns that the people of Australia are expressing, because they are really interested in investing, but these are some of the problems, so you should address them.
Yes. Good to know about that, Excellency. Now let me deviate a little bit from this policies, bilateral talks, and then focus a little bit on your personal life, Dasho. Ever since you became the ambassador, and then you have been staying in Australia, how have you been experiencing this life? I mean, you have a busy life, you have to be there, present almost all the times, like 24/7. But besides your official duties, like, what has been the memorable times you have spent so far?
I was a student here. I was a master's student here 20 years ago. I was at the Australian National University. And at that time, of course, I was based in Canberra. So Canberra is not a new city to me. But I never got to travel around the rest of Australia, so I was mainly restricted to the East Coast, Sydney and Melbourne and the regional areas of Victoria and New South Wales. But since becoming ambassador, having the opportunity to travel, so these are some of the things I look forward to get to see the rest of the country. But you're right; it's quite hectic for us. But in the weekends, I do have a lot of social obligations, even during the weekends with the Bhutanese community, and they take so much trouble to organize certain things, so if you don't show up, they get disappointed, and we would also like to engage with them. But as far as possible, I try and spend time with my family, just relax, and nothing extraordinary. Nothing extraordinary I do.
And whenever you have a little bit of free time, people like me come nagging to you. So we're really sorry for that, Excellency. So, like, over the past couple of years, especially after the COVID, we have seen like majority of Bhutanese people going abroad to study, for work, and then people back home, have been sharing this concern that Bhutan is going to be like empty one day. So on this note, I wanted to hear what Dashu have to say on this.
Here also, I could not agree with His Majesty's thinking. When I came to Australia, our estimate of the Bhutanese in Australia was about 15,000, and we were correct. In 2021, when we opened the embassy, it was about 15,000. Then 2021, early 2022, the borders of Australia reopened. Then you had Bhutanese, because when from 2020 until 2022, no Bhutanese could enter Australia. So there was a huge backlog of applications. You see, so visas were approved. There were people have been granted admissions. So then, when Australia's borders reopened, there was a significant increase in the number of Bhutanese that started coming into Australia. And so from 15,000 in late 2021, it suddenly increased by more than double. It doubled. It went to 30,000 in 1 year. Then it's now reached 34,000. So it increased significantly. And when there was, when we were watching, the BBS or reading stories in Queensland, or you seeing social media of people leaving from Paro Airport, it was quite concerning, because you say, all the young, working, productive citizens leaving. It's a very big concern for Bhutan. So at that time, it was a big concern, I must say.
Yes.
I agree. Especially when the productive population is leaving. But then now the trend is, because I think at that time what surprised people was a sudden surge, and this was because of the backlog. But now I think it's kind of stabilized.
Yes.
And now maybe also decreasing because of the new immigration policies. And now they're also, with the announcement of the GMC, and certain measures being taken in Bhutan, I think now people are also seeing that there will be opportunities in Bhutan. But actually, we would like, we would at some point in the future like the trend to be reversed, and we would want to see Bhutanese going back to work when they are. We have to admit that at the moment, opportunities are not there. It's growing, it's slowly grow, but it'll take some time.
Yes.
But when opportunities do become available in Bhutan, then we would like our educated, exposed, highly skilled people to come back. There's nothing like going back to Bhutan and earning an Australian salary. But we must also look at this as an opportunity when people are gone out. For them, I always tell every young Bhutanese who I meet, don't waste your opportunity here. Don't waste your opportunity. You can work, but concentrate on building up skills, skills that you can transfer and that will be applicable anywhere in the world. Because even if you're not working in Australia, you can go anywhere else to work. But try and build skills that you can apply back in Bhutan.
Your Excellency, lastly, maybe I think we have covered almost all the concerns and all the topics here. Especially among the Bhutanese diaspora in Australia and maybe abroad elsewhere. What can you say about their contribution? Because I think most of the people, that we speak to, that we listen to, most of them seems to be confused how they can contribute, how, what are the steps, what are the measures. So what can you say to them now?
I think now there's no more, I think now this confusion probably should be now over, because I think the message after His Majesty's visit to Australia is very clear, that there is now an avenue for you to contribute to nation building. And I think the GMC team is currently actually in Australia. Today they are in Canberra, but they were here in Perth a few days ago. And they've engaged with the Bhutanese associations in all the different cities, so basically reaching out to the entire Bhutan. But even when His Majesty was here, he made it very clear that now there's a clear avenue for you to invest in Bhutan. And so one is the fixed term deposits that the GMC is floating. where you invest, you also get an assured return.
Yes.
So you are not only sending money back, but you're also getting returns on your money, and in many respects higher than the interest rate
Yes.
from the banks. So there's a clear avenue for you to invest, and then in the future, because the GMC is a very long-term strategy, it's a 40-year strategy, but in time, as the opportunities expand in the GMC, for you to come back and invest in things in the GMC.
Yes.
And His Majesty was using an example of somebody can come and you open a restaurant in Bhutan.
Yes.
Very restaurant of global standards, or any other business
Yes.
of global standard.
On that note, I was just thinking about this, how Bhutanese, how I as an individual can contribute in my own small way. And then I had this doubt. I'm not sure if people out there are having the same thought like me. So because GMC is going to be that top-notch city, first of its kind in the world, and then they're going to be like investors from across the country, across the world. So, like, will I be able to compete with them? There's a doubt in my mind. So I don't know.
I think if you're looking at investing from the conventional point of view, you will not be able to compete against a multinational company or a big company or a very rich millionaire or a billionaire. You will not be able to. But the thing is, I think the GMC is creating avenues for even a small investor from Bhutan to invest and get returns. So, there's a whole range of ways you can invest. So we need not really get worried about that, because there will be means within your capacity to invest. And then if you're enterprising, you can expand that, multiply that, and there'll be opportunities. Basically, now as the message from Bhutan is that we Bhutanese need to think like entrepreneurs.
Lasla. On that note, Your Excellency, if you have any golden words to share on this show.
The one message that few things that I've always been conveying to all the Bhutanese wherever I go is that because we are outside the country, more so because we are outside the country, we must support each other. We must support each other. I've been saying this in all my speeches. We must support each other. We must pull each other up, not pull each other down. Support each other. If you're doing well, and if there's somebody struggling, pull that person up, assist them, and be there for each other. Because that is how we build the strength of our community. So that is my message. Help each other, take care of each other, because we are in a foreign country. And I think this will not only be helping we'll be strengthening our community, and then this will, when the community is united, then you become a force to be reckoned with.
Yes.
Whereas if you are divided and you are not, you don't prosper. Together we prosper, and together and when we are united, we do better. So if there's somebody struggling, we all, and actually I have no doubt about this, because you can see this from the example of when somebody's sick, there's a fund drive, there's overwhelming support, and this is a reflection of Bhutanese values, and this is, I must say, I'm really encouraged that our Bhutanese values of helping each other out, being there for somebody when they are in need, and that is strongly evident among the Bhutanese, and that's really, and that, I must say, is a special feature of Bhutan. We take care of each other, and from the embassy's point of view, if there's anything that the embassy can assist with, we will always be there for every Bhutanese in Australia.
And with that golden note from His Excellency, the Ambassador of Bhutan to Australia, Sonam Tobgay, we bring to an end of yet another episode of Heart to Heart, the stories of us. Today's episode was about the stories of resilience, success, power, nation building, investment, and opportunities. Not here, of course. I mean, back home. And then this show was a call, a louder call for you to be the best and do the best in the most possible way that you can. And with this, we come to yet another enriching, powerful message from our guest today. Until next time, this is your host Cheku signing off for today.